Everyone has a past. Some parts of it feel harmless at first, like faded photographs tucked away in a drawer. But sometimes, those memories have a way of coming back, sneaking into your present when you least expect them. This is Sarah's story, a story that begins with love, but ends in shadows she never imagined. Sarah was 22 the first time she truly felt like her heart had found a home. The city streets bustled quietly in the morning, sunlight spilling over the sidewalks, but inside the small, cozy coffee shop, everything outside seemed to disappear. She sat at a corner table, a warm latte between her hands, and across from her was Jake. He leaned forward, his smile wide, eyes bright, his laughter spilling into the air like music. It was the kind of love that made the world feel still. When he brushed his hand against hers to reach for the sugar, a small jolt ran up her arm. She smiled, feeling that strange, thrilling electricity that only young love could create. Every glance, every laugh, every whispered secret between them felt like it belonged in a movie. And maybe, just maybe, she thought, this would last forever. Remember that night we got lost downtown and ended up in that tiny jazz bar? Jake asked, leaning closer, mischief dancing in his eyes. You were convinced we'd never find our way back. I laughed the whole time. Sarah shook her head, a soft laugh escaping her lips. I was scared. But it ended up being one of the best nights of my life. I'll never forget it. And in that moment, watching him laugh, she believed every word. Every heartbeat felt tethered to him. Every dream they shared, whispered over coffee cups and quiet city streets, felt real. Permanent. Unbreakable. But life doesn't pause for love, no matter how strong it feels. Shadows have a way of creeping in, even in the brightest moments. Sarah didn't notice the small disagreements they brushed off, the tiny misunderstandings they laughed away. She didn't notice how fragile even the strongest bonds can be when tested by the choices of life. Do you think we'll always be like this? She asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Jake took her hand, squeezing it gently. His smile was soft, but his eyes were serious. I hope so. I want this forever. You and me. Nothing else matters. For a time, Sarah believed him. She believed in forever. She believed in the invincibility of their love. The streets outside, the hum of the city, the sunlight spilling into the coffee shop, it all faded around them. It was just them, just the warmth of his presence, the comfort of his laughter. And for that moment, the world felt perfect. But shadows wait patiently. They do not announce themselves. They creep in slowly, almost invisible at first, a missed call, a forgotten message, a small misunderstanding. They grow quietly, gradually, until one day, you cannot ignore them. Even the strongest love, the brightest joy, can be tested. Sarah didn't see it coming. She didn't notice the cracks in their story. All she knew was the warmth of his hand, the sound of his laugh, and the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. That was enough, for now. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the coffee shop. Sarah and Jake laughed, whispered, and dreamed. They imagined a future together, unbroken and endless. And for a while, the world seemed perfect. But this was only the beginning. The love she felt that day would one day return, not as warmth, but as shadows, challenges that would test her courage, her trust, and her strength. And when those shadows returned, Sarah would have to fight to protect everything she loved. Years passed, and life moved forward, as it always does, whether we are ready or not. The city streets that once witnessed Sarah and Jake's laughter now carried new sounds, new lives, new stories. Sarah had grown into herself, carrying with her the memories of that first love like a quiet echo, sometimes warm, sometimes painful, but always a part of her. She married Tom, a man whose calm presence was the opposite of Jake's fiery charm. Where Jake had been impulsive, Tom was steady. Where Jake had sparked excitement, Tom brought comfort. And after the turbulence of youth, Sarah found a peace she hadn't known she needed. They shared quiet mornings, sipping coffee in their sunlit kitchen, discussing plans for the future, and laughing over small, silly things that made the world feel soft and safe. But the past has a stubborn way of lingering, like a shadow at the edge of your vision. Sometimes it's just a memory, a photo, a name, a phrase that makes your heart skip and your stomach twist. For Sarah, the past wasn't gone. It was buried, yes, but never completely forgotten. She would catch herself thinking about Jake at odd moments. A familiar laugh in a street corner cafe, a smell that reminded her of him, the echo of a memory she hadn't touched in years. Tom noticed the moments she paused, staring into nothing, her eyes distant. "Everything okay?" he would ask gently, concerned but never prying too much. Sarah would smile, brushing it off, telling herself it was nothing. But deep down, she knew it was not nothing. It was the past nudging at the edges of her life, waiting for a crack to enter. They moved into their first apartment together, decorating it with care, building routines that felt safe and predictable. There were weekend walks in the park, late-night movies, quiet dinners, and soft conversations about dreams that now seemed reachable. Sarah loved Tom, she truly did. She loved the way he made her feel secure, the way he listened, the way he laughed without expecting perfection. And yet, even in the safety of their love, a tiny pulse of unease lingered beneath the surface. A whisper of the life she had once left behind. Sometimes, she would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about choices she had made, paths she had taken. She thought about Jake, about the intensity of their love, about the mistakes and the heartbreak that had led her here. She wondered if the past would ever come back, not as a memory, but as a force she couldn't control. And though she tried to push the thoughts away, she couldn't fully escape the feeling that something was waiting, something that might shake the world she had carefully built with Tom. It started small. A name flickering on her phone screen that she didn't immediately recognize. A message from an unknown number that made her heart jump. At first, she dismissed it. It was probably nothing, she told herself. But as days went by, the signs became clearer. Someone was watching, someone knew, someone was trying to reach her. Sarah didn't know it yet, but her past, the love she thought she had left behind, was stirring. And it was about to collide with her present in ways she could not imagine. The life she had built, the marriage she cherished, the sense of safety she had worked so hard to create, it was all on the brink of being tested. She tried to focus on Tom, on the warmth of their life together, on the laughter they shared. But the nagging unease persisted, a shadow trailing at the edge of her consciousness. And then, one evening, the shadow moved closer, more deliberate, more threatening than ever before. A phone call arrived. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years. A voice that carried the weight of the past, the intensity of what once had been, and now something darker, a reminder that some stories never truly end. "Sarah, it's been a while. Do you remember us? Do you remember everything we shared?" Her stomach tightened, her pulse quickened. The past was no longer a memory. It was alive. And it was coming for her. Sarah froze as the voice came through her phone, familiar and chilling all at once. Jake. The man she had loved with everything she had once thought was forever. The man she had left behind, believing that chapter of her life was closed. Yet here he was, years later, as if no time had passed at all, bringing that past straight into her present. "Sarah, do you remember us? Do you remember everything we shared?" His tone was calm, almost casual, but the weight behind it made her stomach twist. Her pulse quickened. Memories she had carefully tucked away, whispered nights, stolen kisses, promises that now seemed foolish, flooded her mind all at once. I don't think this is a good time," she stammered, trying to sound composed, though her hands shook as she gripped the phone. Jake laughed softly, low and dangerous, the kind of laugh that promised trouble. "Oh, it's never a bad time to remember, Sarah. Don't you miss it? Don't you miss what we had?" Sarah swallowed hard, shaking her head. "No. We can't talk about this. I'm married now. Please, just leave me alone." But he didn't. The calls came more often, each one carefully calculated. At first, it was nostalgia, soft, almost gentle reminders of their shared past. But soon, it turned into something darker. Questions about why her marriage had happened, insinuations that she had made a mistake, hints that he knew things about her present that only someone who had been intimately close could possibly know. The first time he threatened her directly, Sarah's blood ran cold. "If you don't, I will tell Tom everything," he said casually, almost smiling. "And I have all our pictures, all our videos. Don't think I wouldn't use them. Don't think I couldn't ruin everything you've built." Sarah's hands trembled. She tried to reason with him, pleading over the phone, reaching out through mutual friends, even trying to appeal to his sense of decency. Nothing worked. Every attempt to stop him only seemed to fuel his persistence. He began insisting, more than words, more than threats. Demanding something that made her skin crawl, something she could never, ever agree to. Fear seeped into every corner of her life. She found herself checking her phone constantly, heart racing whenever it rang. Every notification was a punch in the stomach, a reminder that the past she had buried was alive, stalking her. She felt trapped. Every day became a struggle between hiding, pretending, and trying to maintain the life she had fought so hard to build with Tom. One evening, tears streamed down her face as she told herself firmly, "I will not let him control me anymore. I will not let him win." That night, she sat at her desk, recording every call, taking screenshots of every threatening message, writing down every detail, the dates, the times, the words, the tone. She knew she had to gather proof, to build something solid, something undeniable. She had to take control of the situation, or risk losing everything she loved. And yet, even as she collected evidence, a shadow of fear lingered. She imagined what would happen if Tom knew before she had a plan. She imagined the heartbreak, the judgment, the potential destruction of their marriage. But she also knew she couldn't face this alone anymore. She had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim her life from the man who thought he could control it with fear and threats. It was in that moment, sitting alone in the dim light of her apartment, that Sarah made a decision. She would not beg, she would not run, and she would not be silent. She would confront the past, not with words, not with tears, but with action. She would gather every piece of evidence, protect her present, and face the shadow of her past head-on. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt something stir inside her, not fear, not despair, but determination. This was no longer about hiding. This was no longer about avoiding. It was about taking control, about ensuring that Jake could never hurt her or Tom again. And in that quiet, tension-filled apartment, Sarah knew the battle was about to begin. The calls didn't stop. The messages didn't stop. Every ping of her phone made Sarah's chest tighten. She tried to focus on her work, on the quiet comfort of her home with Tom, but the shadow of Jake's threats followed her everywhere. Every time she glanced at the screen, every time her phone lit up, a wave of panic surged through her, hot and suffocating. One evening, Sarah collapsed onto her bed, tears streaming down her face. The weight of fear, shame, and helplessness pressed down on her like a physical force. She hugged a pillow to her chest, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear, wishing the nightmare would end. The memories of her past, once distant and gentle, now felt like a chain around her neck, tightening with each threat, each call, each message from Jake. She remembered their first meeting, their laughter, the excitement, the warmth. And now, those same memories were twisted into weapons against her. Every photograph, every video he threatened to release, became a noose around the life she had built with Tom. She felt trapped in a nightmare of her own making, one she couldn't escape. She picked up the phone and dialed her closest friend, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, the words barely audible. He won't leave me alone. I'm scared. I don't want to lose everything." Her friend's voice was gentle but firm. "You're not alone, Sarah. You're strong, and you can fight this. We'll figure it out together." But even as those words offered a small comfort, Sarah felt the panic rising again. She imagined Tom seeing those images, hearing the threats, realizing the danger that had been lurking in her past. She imagined their life crumbling, their trust shattered. The thought made her stomach twist and her chest ache. She sat at her desk, the phone still in her hand, staring at the screen as if willing it to disappear. The dim light of the room reflected in her eyes, highlighting the mix of fear and determination that had begun to form. For weeks, she had felt powerless, but in that moment, a small spark ignited inside her. She could feel it, something shifting. She was terrified, yes, but she was also angry. Angry at the audacity of someone who thought they could manipulate her life with threats. Angry that a past she had worked so hard to leave behind was now trying to destroy her present. And in that anger, she found clarity. She would not be a victim any longer. She opened her laptop and began to document everything, every call, every message, every threat. She made notes of the times and dates, saved screenshots, and recorded the calls where Jake's voice was clear, unmistakable. It was meticulous work, exhausting work, but it gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in weeks. Each piece of evidence she collected was a shield, a step toward reclaiming her life. And yet, even as she worked, the emotional weight pressed down. She cried quietly, whispered to herself, questioned her own courage. She felt the fragility of her situation, the enormity of the stakes. The fear was real, tangible, and it clawed at her with every passing moment. But beneath the fear, beneath the tears, Sarah discovered a seed of determination that would grow into something unstoppable. She realized that she had to act, not impulsively, not out of desperation, but strategically. She had to protect her marriage, her peace, and herself. And to do that, she needed to plan, to prepare, to fight smartly. That night, lying awake on her bed, Sarah made a silent vow. She would gather every piece of evidence, confront the past, and ensure that Jake could never hurt her or anyone else again. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with tension and fear, but she knew she had to take it. She couldn't run forever. She couldn't hide forever. In the stillness of her apartment, with the city quiet around her, Sarah felt the first stirrings of courage. The first flicker of resolve that whispered she could survive this. That she could fight back. That justice was possible, and that she had the power to reclaim her life. The nightmare had pushed her to the edge, but now, for the first time, she was ready to step forward. The following morning, Sarah awoke to the quiet hum of the city outside her window. The sunlight streamed softly across the walls, but inside her apartment, the air felt heavy, tense, as if the shadows from yesterday had followed her into the new day. Her hands trembled slightly as she brewed her morning coffee, the aroma normally comforting now doing little to soothe the gnawing anxiety that had taken root deep in her chest. She felt the lingering fear from Jake's relentless harassment, the memory of his voice in her ear threatening her life, her marriage, her peace. But there was something else too. A faint, stubborn spark, the memory of her vow the night before. She would no longer be passive. She could not. She would act, and she would act with precision, intelligence, and courage. She sat at her desk, opening her laptop, and began to create a meticulous system. Every message, every call, every threat from Jake would be documented, time-stamped, and stored. She began by going through her phone call history, listening to recordings she had managed to capture the previous night. Each time Jake's voice filled the room through her headphones, she shivered, but she no longer trembled with helplessness. This time, each shiver was a reminder that she had proof, that she was no longer defenseless. Sarah opened a spreadsheet and began to log every interaction, the date, the time, the content of the conversation, the method, text, call, social media message. She labeled each entry with a short description: threat about past photos, attempted manipulation, demand for personal meeting. The spreadsheet grew quickly, each line a piece of the puzzle, a building block for the defense she would construct. Next, she turned to her emails, messages, and social media interactions. She carefully downloaded all attachments, screenshots of messages, and even pictures she had once shared with Jake. The images themselves, once a symbol of intimacy and love, had become tools of leverage in his hands. Now, she reclaimed them as evidence, documenting them with meticulous care. Hours passed, punctuated by occasional moments of exhaustion when she buried her face in her hands, tears streaking down her cheeks. Fear remained, lurking beneath the surface, but determination was stronger. Every record she kept was a small victory, a way to wrest control from Jake's manipulation. She knew that knowledge was power, and every file she stored was a step toward justice. As she worked, her mind began to race with possibilities. She imagined confronting him directly, but she quickly dismissed that idea. It was too dangerous. She imagined confiding in Tom immediately, telling him everything without preparation, but the fear of shocking him, of shattering the life they had built, held her back. Instead, she focused on what she could control: evidence, strategy, preparation. By mid-afternoon, her apartment was strewn with papers, printed messages, screenshots on her laptop, a detailed timeline of Jake's harassment. She paused, looking at the chaotic spread in front of her, and realized she was no longer the frightened, passive girl she had been. She was a strategist now, a planner, a fighter. And this fight wasn't just for herself, it was for her marriage, her peace, her future. She knew she couldn't act alone forever. The stakes were too high, the danger too real. So, as part of her plan, she began researching legal avenues, the rights of victims in cases of blackmail and harassment. She learned about recording laws, evidence collection, and legal protections under state law. Every detail she absorbed made her feel more empowered, more capable of turning the tables on Jake. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across her apartment, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She remembered the fear that had consumed her, the helpless nights, the relentless anxiety. But she also felt pride, a flicker of hope, a sense that the power had returned to her hands. The terror she had lived with was real, but it would not define her. She then began considering the tactical aspects of confronting Jake, not directly, not recklessly, but smartly, legally, and effectively. She needed a plan that would protect her, protect Tom, and ensure that Jake could not escape justice. She envisioned a controlled environment where he would feel confident and in control, unaware that every step was being observed, documented, and recorded. Sarah began drafting possible scenarios. A meeting at a public location? Too risky. A meeting in a controlled environment, with authorities involved? Safer, but required careful orchestration. Every scenario she imagined was evaluated for risk and potential exposure. She realized that, although fear was still present, careful planning could neutralize the danger. Late that night, Sarah took a deep breath and reflected on her journey so far. The girl who had been terrified, crying alone in her apartment, had transformed into someone capable of action, someone capable of reclaiming her life. Each document, each recording, each piece of evidence represented more than proof. It represented her courage, her determination, and her refusal to be a victim any longer. Her phone vibrated, but this time, she didn't panic. She ignored the call, focusing instead on organizing her growing collection of evidence. The future would require patience, precision, and courage, but she was ready. She would not allow the past to control her present or threaten her marriage. By the end of the night, Sarah had a complete, organized system, a timeline of threats, recordings of calls, screenshots of messages, and an internal strategy for the next steps. She had taken control, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of power returning. And yet, deep in her chest, she knew this was only the beginning. The plan had to be executed carefully. One mistake, one misstep, could unravel everything. But Sarah also knew that fear alone could no longer paralyze her. She had turned fear into fuel, and now that fuel would drive the strategy that would confront Jake, expose him, and protect her life. In the stillness of her apartment, surrounded by evidence, Sarah whispered to herself, "This ends on my terms. No more fear. No more control. I will protect my life. I will protect my marriage. I will not be silent any longer." And with that, the first true seeds of justice had been planted. Sarah was no longer running from her past. She was preparing to face it. And to win. The days after Sarah's careful gathering of evidence passed with an almost unbearable tension. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The photographs, screenshots, recordings meticulously organized on her desk were her armor, her shield, but also constant reminders of the nightmare that had invaded her life. Every small noise, every notification, every shadow of movement outside her window made her heart skip a beat. The fear, which had been quiet and nagging before, had become a living, breathing presence. Despite her preparation, her anxiety persisted. She had thought that collecting evidence, organizing every threat, and planning her strategy would give her relief, a sense of control. But the truth was, it only heightened the stakes. Every recording, every screenshot, every documented call was proof, but proof only mattered when paired with courage. And courage, she realized, was easier said than felt. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in deep purples and oranges, her phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but she knew immediately whose voice it carried. Jake. The past was no longer distant, it had returned with force, unrelenting and cruel. "Sarah," he said, his tone deceptively soft, "do you remember us? All those times we shared? The things we did together?" Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the phone. She had expected this, but expectation did little to dull the fear. "Jake, please, just stop. I've told you before, this isn't appropriate. I'm married. You need to leave me alone." He laughed, a sound low and menacing. "Leave you alone? Oh, Sarah, you know I can't do that. You can't just walk away. You were mine once, and part of you still belongs to me." Sarah felt a cold wave wash over her. The familiarity of his voice, once comforting, now carried a dangerous weight. Her chest tightened, a lump forming in her throat. Her mind raced with questions. How had he found her again? How much did he know? Could she ever escape him? She tried reasoning with him, again and again, pleading with words that were no longer effective. He ignored them. Each attempt to appeal to his decency was met with threats, subtle at first, then more overt. He reminded her of photographs, videos, intimate memories she had hoped were long forgotten. He suggested that if she did not comply with his demands, the life she had built, the marriage she cherished, would crumble. Fear turned to anger, and anger to a burning determination. Sarah realized that begging him, appealing to his humanity, would never work. She would have to take action, and that action had to be precise. That night, alone in her dimly lit apartment, she allowed herself a moment to break down. She sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled to her chest, tears running freely. The emotional weight of months of fear, the constant intrusion of the past into her present, the threat to everything she loved, it was too much to carry silently. Her mind replayed moments from her marriage with Tom, the quiet dinners, the shared laughter, the soft kisses in the kitchen, and contrasted them with Jake's shadow looming over her. The contrast was unbearable. How could someone she had trusted and loved so deeply in the past become such a source of fear and manipulation in her present? Hours passed. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Sarah cried until her body was exhausted, until her hands were raw from clenching them in frustration, until the ache in her chest was so intense it felt like it might break her in two. But amidst the tears, something began to shift. Fear was still there, but beneath it, a stubborn spark of determination began to grow. She would not let Jake win. She would not let him control her life, destroy her marriage, or ruin her peace of mind. She was terrified, yes, but she was also smart, resourceful, and ready. She returned to her desk, weary but focused, and reviewed the evidence she had painstakingly collected. Each recording, each screenshot, each documented threat became more than just proof, they were weapons in her hands, tools to reclaim her life. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small surge of hope. If she could use these tools wisely, she could trap him, expose him, and finally end the nightmare. But she knew this wouldn't be easy. The psychological toll of the threats, the emotional weight of fear, and the constant anticipation of his next move had left her drained. She needed support. She needed someone she could trust completely, someone who would stand with her and help navigate the dangerous waters ahead. Her thoughts turned to Tom. She loved him deeply, and the thought of keeping him in the dark any longer made her stomach twist. But the timing had to be perfect. She needed to have all her evidence ready, all her strategy in place, before revealing the truth. She couldn't risk shocking him without preparation. She needed his support, yes, but she also needed to ensure that together they could take action against Jake safely. The emotional breaking point had come and passed, leaving Sarah standing at the edge of fear and courage. The despair, the tears, the panic, they had been necessary. They had forced her to confront the reality of her situation fully, to acknowledge the danger, and to understand that running or hiding was no longer an option. She spent the next hours planning, not impulsively, but methodically. She mapped out every possible scenario, every potential risk. She imagined Jake's possible reactions, his possible tactics to escape detection, and considered how to counter each one. She reviewed her recordings, her messages, and every scrap of evidence, mentally rehearsing how it could be presented to authorities, how it could be used to ensure justice. By the early hours of the morning, exhaustion pulled at her body, but her mind was sharp, focused. The emotional storm that had left her broken hours before had been replaced with clarity. Fear had transformed into determination, panic into strategy, and tears into action. Sarah knew she was no longer the frightened girl she had been when the first calls arrived. She was someone ready to fight back, to reclaim her life, to confront the past and protect the future she had built with Tom. And in that quiet, dimly lit apartment, surrounded by the evidence of months of harassment, Sarah made a silent promise: she would see this through to the end. Jake had intruded into her life, threatened her happiness, and tried to manipulate her with fear. But she was ready. She had strategy, evidence, courage, and determination. And she would use all of it to ensure that he could never harm her or anyone else again. The emotional breaking point had revealed the depth of her fear, but it had also revealed the strength within her. Sarah's journey was far from over. The nightmare would not end with mere defiance, it would end with calculated, intelligent action. And for the first time, Sarah felt ready to step fully into that action, to confront the shadow of her past with a plan that would protect her present, her marriage, and her life. Sarah had barely slept that night. The dim glow of the morning sun spilled into the apartment, catching on the organized chaos of papers, screenshots, and recordings that now covered her desk. Each piece of evidence was a reminder of the nightmare she had endured and of the battle that was about to begin. But the heaviest weight of all wasn't the harassment, or the fear, or even the threat itself. It was the secret she had carried from day one. Tom stirred in the kitchen, humming softly as he poured coffee into 2 mugs. The smell usually brought her comfort, but today, it made her stomach twist. She watched him from the bedroom doorway, her hands trembling slightly. The words she had held back for so long now demanded to be spoken. And she knew that she couldn't face the final step of her plan without complete honesty. She took a deep breath, her fingers clenching around the edge of the doorframe. "Tom, can we talk? It's something important. Something private." Tom looked at her, concern flashing across his face. "Of course. What's wrong?" She guided him to the living room, her chest tight with anxiety. The coffee table between them felt like a small barrier, a fragile shield against the storm she was about to unleash. She sank into the sofa, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Tom, I need to tell you something about my past. About someone I was with before we met." Her voice trembled slightly, the admission itself feeling like a small betrayal, even though it wasn't. Tom sat down across from her, eyes searching hers. "You can tell me anything, Sarah. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Her chest tightened further. She wanted to run, to turn away, to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. But she knew that hiding now could ruin everything. She drew in a shaky breath. "It's about Jake, my ex. We were together for a long time. And he's been contacting me, threatening me, blackmailing me. He has pictures, videos, he wants things I can't give him. And if I don't, he said he would tell you everything." Tom's face froze, shock and disbelief mingling in his eyes. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, and Sarah felt her heart sink. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment, but the raw shock was almost unbearable. Finally, Tom's voice broke the silence, low and measured. "Sarah, I can't believe this is happening. I mean, you've kept this hidden?" "It wasn't hidden out of secrecy," she said quickly, tears pricking her eyes. "I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to risk our marriage. I thought I could handle it myself. I tried reasoning with him, pleading with him, but nothing worked. He's relentless, Tom. And I can't stop him alone." Tom reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I understand. I can't imagine what you've been through. But we're together in this. We'll figure it out. We'll make sure he can't hurt you or us ever again." Her chest eased slightly at his words. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of relief. Tom's reaction wasn't anger, it wasn't judgment, it was partnership, love, and determination. Together, they could face this threat. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. I've been collecting evidence, recordings, messages, screenshots. Everything he's done. I think we can use it to go to the police. To make sure he's held accountable. Tom's eyes softened, but there was also a glint of strategic thinking. Good. We'll need a plan. We can't rush into this. We need to make sure everything is airtight, everything documented, everything legal. And we have to think about how we confront him safely, without giving him a chance to hurt you further. Sarah felt a small surge of hope. Together, they began to strategize, laying out each step carefully. They reviewed the evidence, making sure nothing was missing, nothing could be questioned. They discussed the timing of contacting the authorities, the safest locations, and how to orchestrate a controlled situation where Jake could be confronted without risk. Hours passed as they meticulously built the framework for justice. Every detail was considered: how Jake might react, how to ensure he could not escape, how to protect themselves emotionally and legally. Sarah felt a growing sense of empowerment. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was preparing, planning, and reclaiming control. At one point, Tom paused, his hand still on hers. Sarah, I know this has been terrifying. And I know the emotional toll is immense. But I want you to know I believe you, I trust you, and I'm here with you. We will see this through together. And Jake, he's not going to win. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they were not solely from fear, they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of solidarity. For the first time in months, Sarah felt truly supported, truly safe in the knowledge that she and Tom were aligned, that they had a plan, and that they were no longer alone. The evening shadows deepened outside, casting long streaks of orange and purple across the apartment. Sarah and Tom sat together, silently reviewing the steps they would take, each point on their checklist a promise of action. The fear that had gripped Sarah so tightly was still present, but it had transformed into purpose, into resolve. By the end of the night, Sarah had shared everything with Tom, her past, the threats, the evidence, and together, they had crafted a plan. It was detailed, precise, and legal. They would not confront Jake recklessly. They would not be victims. They would be prepared, methodical, and decisive. Sarah finally leaned back, exhausted but determined. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of control return to her life. The nightmare had been acknowledged, the threat assessed, and the strategy outlined. The next steps would be crucial, but she no longer felt powerless. And in that quiet apartment, with Tom beside her and the city stretching endlessly beyond the windows, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The fear was still there, it would always linger, but so was courage. So was strategy. So was the certainty that the past could no longer control her future. The first stage of the plan had been completed: honesty, clarity, and partnership. And now, the real work was about to begin. Justice would be served, and Sarah would step forward not as a victim, but as someone reclaiming her life, her marriage, and her peace of mind. The morning of the operation arrived like a heavy drumbeat in Sarah's chest. She woke to the muted hum of the city, sunlight spilling into her apartment, but inside, there was no comfort, only tension, anticipation, and the quiet roar of determination. Months of fear, preparation, and planning had led to this day. The nightmare that had haunted her life, the relentless intrusion of Jake's threats, was about to meet justice. Tom sat across from her at the kitchen table, calm but focused, reviewing the final details. The police team was ready, briefed on every scenario, every contingency. The plan was precise: a controlled environment, legal safeguards, and careful monitoring. Jake would believe he was meeting Sarah alone, but in reality, he was stepping into a trap designed to ensure he could never harm her again. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands slightly trembling. Fear was still there, it would never fully disappear, but now it was tempered by preparation and support. She looked at Tom, gratitude and trust swelling in her chest. I couldn't have done this without you, she whispered. You don't have to, Tom said softly. We're in this together. And today, it ends. Hours later, Sarah positioned herself at the designated meeting point, a quiet, controlled location arranged by the authorities. The room was small, neutral, and monitored by cameras, every precaution taken to prevent Jake from escaping or harming anyone. Her heart raced as she waited, every second stretching endlessly, but she reminded herself of the strategy. Stay calm, follow the plan, and trust that the preparation would hold. When the door opened, Sarah felt a jolt of recognition and adrenaline. Jake stepped inside, confidence in his stride, a smirk playing across his face. He had no idea what awaited him. He believed, as he always had, that he was in control. "Sarah," he said, his voice smooth and casual, though there was a flicker of impatience. "It's been a while. I didn't think you'd actually show up." Sarah's hands were steady, her voice firm. "I'm here. But this isn't a negotiation. This isn't what you think it is." Jake's smirk faltered slightly. "Oh, aren't you scared? You know I have what I need to ruin you. You know I could destroy everything you've built with Tom." Sarah met his gaze, unflinching. "No. You don't control me anymore. You never did. And today, that ends." At that moment, officers stepped out of their hidden positions, surrounding Jake calmly but firmly. His eyes widened in shock, the smirk evaporating instantly. What is this?" he shouted, taking a step back. "This," Sarah said, her voice steady, "is justice. You've threatened me, harassed me, and tried to manipulate my life. But I've collected everything, your messages, your calls, your threats. And now, you will face the consequences under the law." Panic overtook Jake as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. He stammered, trying to explain, to deny, to regain control, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable, organized meticulously, and the authorities had every step recorded. Sarah watched him being escorted from the room, every detail captured on camera, every threat neutralized. The fear that had gripped her for months, the sleepless nights, the tears, the anxiety, began to dissolve, replaced by relief and a cautious triumph. She had survived. She had acted decisively. She had reclaimed her life. Tom stepped forward, taking her hand, and she felt the grounding comfort of his presence. "You were incredible," he said softly, pride and love mingling in his voice. "I'm so proud of you." Sarah exhaled, a weight lifting from her chest. "It's over," she whispered. "Finally, it's over." The authorities assured her that Jake would face full legal consequences under US law for blackmail, harassment, and attempted coercion. Justice would be served, and the nightmare that had overshadowed her life would no longer hold power over her or her marriage. Later, back in the quiet of her apartment, Sarah and Tom sat together, hands intertwined, the tension of months slowly fading. The evidence, the planning, the fear, and the confrontation had been exhausting, but they had seen it through. The past had tried to intrude, to control, to destroy, but they had met it with strategy, courage, and love. Sarah leaned into Tom, the first real moment of peace in months. She realized that fear had transformed her, yes, but it had also revealed her strength. She had faced her worst nightmare and emerged not as a victim, but as someone empowered, capable, and resilient. And as the city lights flickered beyond the window, casting a soft glow into the apartment, Sarah allowed herself to finally believe it. The shadow of the past had been vanquished. She was free. Her marriage was intact, stronger for the trial they had endured together. And her life, her peace, her happiness, her future was finally, fully, her own. The city felt different the morning after Jake's arrest. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, bright and warm, and for the first time in months, it didn't carry the weight of fear. The apartment, once filled with tension and shadows, now felt like a sanctuary again. The chaos of evidence, the endless planning, and the sleepless nights had all led to this moment. The nightmare was over, and a fragile peace settled over her. Tom was already in the kitchen, making coffee, the familiar aroma drawing her out of bed. He looked up, eyes soft, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Morning," he said quietly, his voice steady but warm. "Sleep well?" Sarah shook her head with a soft laugh, the sound surprisingly light. "Not exactly, but I feel better. Lighter." She moved toward him, feeling the relief of safety and normalcy seep through her like sunlight. The burden of months of fear was still there in the shadows of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. They sat together at the table, the world outside humming with life, oblivious to the storm they had just weathered. For a moment, they simply drank their coffee in silence, sharing the comfort of being together, unthreatened, unafraid. "I can't believe it's finally over," Sarah said softly. "All those months, the fear, the panic, the calls, it's like a weight has been lifted." Tom reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. "You were incredible," he said. "I've never seen anyone handle something like that. You stayed strong, collected evidence, and faced him. You didn't just survive, you fought back. And we did it together." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, not from fear this time, but from relief, gratitude, and the overwhelming sense of closure. She realized how much strength she had found within herself, how much courage had been born from the darkest days. The emotional turmoil, the sleepless nights, the anxiety. They had all been part of a journey that led her here, to safety, to love, and to justice. Over the next few days, Sarah and Tom met with the police and legal authorities to finalize the case. Jake's arrest had triggered a series of legal proceedings. His blackmail, harassment, and threats were now fully documented, and the authorities ensured that he would face punishment under US law. Sarah provided additional statements, answered questions, and reviewed the timeline of events meticulously. Each step reinforced her sense of control, her empowerment, and the restoration of her life. Even in the midst of legal matters, Sarah allowed herself small moments of normalcy. She went for walks with Tom in the park, laughing softly as they recalled lighter memories from before the nightmare. They shared quiet dinners, held hands while watching movies, and allowed themselves to rebuild the intimacy and trust that fear had temporarily threatened to erode. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, city lights twinkling like distant stars, Sarah leaned into Tom's shoulder. "I was so afraid," she whispered. I thought everything I built with you could be destroyed. I thought I couldn't protect us." Tom wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You did protect us, Sarah. You protected yourself, our marriage, and our future. And you taught me something too. You taught me that courage doesn't mean not feeling fear. Courage means facing it, even when it's terrifying." Sarah smiled softly, feeling the warmth of love and reassurance wrap around her like a shield. She realized that the past, while it could haunt, could also strengthen. The pain, the fear, the emotional torment, they had forged a resilience she had never known she possessed. In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy. The city moved on, oblivious to the battles fought in apartments, in phones, in whispered fears. But for Sarah, the internal victory, the reclaiming of control, the triumph over fear, the justice secured, was immeasurable. She no longer felt like a victim of her past. She felt whole, empowered, and capable of facing whatever life might bring. Sarah and Tom continued to nurture their marriage, appreciating the fragile beauty of trust and security. They spoke openly, laughed freely, and allowed themselves to experience happiness without the looming shadow of fear. The bond between them deepened, strengthened by the trials they had endured together, tested by darkness and proven resilient. One quiet evening, Sarah placed her hand on the stack of evidence that had once been a symbol of terror. Now, it was a reminder of courage, strategy, and justice. She knew that life would always carry challenges, that fear could return in new forms, but she also knew that she was no longer powerless. She had faced the darkness, navigated it, and emerged victorious. As the city lights shimmered outside, Sarah whispered softly to herself, a vow carried in the calm of the night, "I am stronger than my fears. I am the author of my life. And nothing will control me again." And in that moment, with Tom by her side, Sarah finally allowed herself to exhale fully, letting go of the weight that had pressed on her chest for months. The past was behind her. The threat was neutralized. The nightmare had ended. And ahead lay a future she could embrace without fear, with love, courage, and unwavering strength. The weeks after Jake's arrest passed in a quiet rhythm, almost surreal to Sarah. The relentless fear, the anxiety, and the constant tension that had once shadowed every moment were gone. She woke each morning without the gnawing dread that had haunted her nights. The apartment, once a battleground of memories and evidence, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where life could unfold naturally again. Sarah and Tom had fallen into a gentle routine. They cooked together in the kitchen, their laughter echoing softly against the walls. They went for walks through the park, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces and the freedom of breathing without fear. Every small act, every mundane moment, felt like a victory, a celebration of the life they had fought to protect. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, city lights shimmering below, Sarah let herself reflect on the journey she had endured. She remembered the nights of terror, the endless calls, the suffocating anxiety, and the emotional breakdowns that had threatened to consume her. She remembered the moments when she felt powerless, trapped by her past, and yet she had survived. She had fought. She had strategized. She had reclaimed her life. Tom reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "You've grown so much through this," he said softly. "I've seen you at your lowest, and I've seen you fight back. You're stronger than I ever imagined." Sarah smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek, not from fear or pain, but from relief and the deep, quiet pride of survival. "It wasn't just me," she said. "It was us. We faced it together, and that made all the difference. I couldn't have done this without you." They sat in silence for a while, simply holding hands, feeling the calm settle over them. The nightmare that had dominated her life for months was no longer a looming presence. The evidence she had gathered, the careful planning, the courage to confront Jake, it had all led to this moment of peace. In the days that followed, Sarah even found herself smiling more freely, engaging in conversations without the background hum of fear, and allowing herself to enjoy life without constant vigilance. She reconnected with friends, sharing laughter and stories, allowing herself to exist fully in the present rather than constantly anticipating the next threat. One afternoon, she sat with Tom in their favorite cafe, the warm sunlight pouring through the windows. She watched him animatedly tell a story to a stranger at the next table, his laughter genuine, unguarded. She realized how much she had missed this, how much of her life had been overshadowed by fear and secrecy. And now, she could live fully, openly, without hiding pieces of herself or her past. Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that no matter what comes next, I trust us. I trust our love. And I'm ready to face anything with you by my side." Tom's eyes softened, and he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "And I trust you, Sarah. We've come through darkness together, and it's only made us stronger. Nothing can take that away." Later, in the quiet of their apartment, Sarah placed the last of the evidence into a secure folder, a symbol of closure rather than fear. She knew she would never forget what had happened, nor the lessons she had learned about courage, strategy, and self-empowerment. But the evidence no longer carried the weight of terror, it now symbolized triumph, justice, and resilience. As night fell, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows, Sarah and Tom sat together on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, sharing stories and laughter. The past, while it had shaped them, no longer controlled them. They were free to build their life on trust, love, and mutual respect, stronger for the trials they had endured. Sarah reflected on the journey, from the panic, the fear, and the emotional breakdowns, to the careful strategy, the confrontation, and the eventual justice. Every step had demanded courage, patience, and resilience. And now, the emotional victory was complete. The nightmare had ended, the threat neutralized, and the life she had fought to protect was fully restored. She rested her head on Tom's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The fear was gone, replaced by love, trust, and an unshakable sense of empowerment. She had survived, she had reclaimed her life, and she had proven to herself that courage and strategy could overcome even the darkest threats. And as the night deepened, with the city quiet around them, Sarah whispered softly to herself, a mantra that would carry her forward: "I am free. I am safe. I am stronger than fear. And I will never let it control me again." In that moment, the story that had begun in fear, tension, and helplessness concluded in triumph, resilience, and love. Sarah and Tom, united and stronger than ever, had reclaimed their lives, their marriage, and their peace of mind. The darkness had been faced, confronted, and defeated, and ahead lay a future filled with hope, strength, and unwavering courage.